The ancient stones of Castle Everbright echoed with hurried footsteps as Prince Alden, a boy of merely 10 summers, chased his wooden dragon through the winding corridors. His laughter bounced off the walls, a stark contrast to the somber mood that had descended upon the castle in recent days. As he rounded a corner, the toy slipping from his grasp, Alden skidded to a halt. Voices drifted from his father's study, urgent and hushed. The door stood ajar, a sliver of candlelight spilling into the hallway. "Your Majesty," a raspy voice spoke, one Alden didn't recognize. "The signs are clear. The great dragon will come, and with it, devastation unlike any our kingdom has ever known." Alden's breath caught in his throat. He inched closer, pressing his eye to the gap. Inside, he saw his father, King Cedric, standing rigid before the ornate fireplace. Across from him, a figure shrouded in a tattered cloak raised a gnarled hand, pointing at an old map spread across the king's desk. When King Cedric's voice was barely a whisper, the cloaked figure, a seer, Alden realized, tilted their head. "Time is fluid, Your Majesty, but the dragon will come when the prince comes of age, when he is ready to take the throne, or to fall defending it." Alden's wooden toy clattered to the floor. Both men turned, and for a heartbeat, the young prince found himself staring into the milky white eyes of the seer. Alden, his father's voice boomed. "To bed, now." The boy scrambled away, his mind reeling. As he burrowed under his blankets that night, his dreams were filled with fire and the beat of massive wings. In the years to come, long after the seer had left and his father had tried to assure him it was all nonsense, Alden would remember those words. The dragon was coming, and somehow his fate was tied to its arrival. 7 years had passed since the night of the prophecy, and Castle Everbright had become more of a prison than a home to Prince Alden. The once carefree boy had grown into a restless young man, his vibrant spirit dulled by the confines of stone walls and his father's overprotective grip. King Cedric, haunted by the seer's words, had slowly tightened security around the castle. Guards patrolled every corridor, and Alden's movements were constantly monitored. The king's fear of the prophesied dragon had twisted into an obsession with keeping his son safe and trapped. On his 17th name day, Alden stood at his chamber window, gazing longingly at the world beyond the castle walls. The distant mountains beckoned, their peaks shrouded in mist. How he yearned to explore them, to feel the wind on his face and the earth beneath his feet. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Enter," he called, turning to find his father's steward, a portly man named Gareth, bowing low. "Your Highness," Gareth wheezed, "His Majesty requests your presence in the great hall for your name-day celebration." Alden sighed. Another feast, another reminder of his gilded cage. "Tell him I'll be there shortly." As Gareth waddled away, Alden's eyes fell on the sword hanging above his bed, a gift from his father years ago, yet never used in true combat. He ran his fingers along the intricate hilt, feeling the weight of unfulfilled potential. The great hall buzzed with forced merriment as Alden entered. Nobles in their finest attire parted to make way for him, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. Everyone knew of the king's paranoia, of the prince kept hidden away for his own good. King Cedric rose from his throne, arms outstretched. "My son, come, let us celebrate your day of birth." As Alden approached, he noticed the deep lines etched into his father's face, the silver threading through his once golden hair. The weight of the prophecy had taken its toll on them both. "Father," Alden began, his voice low but firm, "I wish to speak with you about my future, about my role in the kingdom." The king's smile faltered. Now, there's time for such serious talk later. Today is for celebration." But Alden persisted. "Father, I cannot remain hidden forever. Our people need." Enough. King Cedric's voice rang out, silencing the hall. He gripped Alden's shoulder, his eyes wild with barely contained fear. "You are safe here, my son. That is all that matters." As the feast wore on, Alden found himself retreating inward, his thoughts a storm of frustration and longing. He was a prince in title only, denied the chance to truly serve his people or prepare for whatever threat might come. That night, as the castle slept, Alden made a decision. If he couldn't leave the castle, he would find a way to grow stronger within its walls, to prepare himself for the destiny that seemed to hover just beyond the horizon. The clash of steel echoed through the deserted courtyard, muffled by the pre-dawn mist. Prince Alden, sweat glistening on his brow, parried another swift attack from his opponent. His arms ached, his breath came in ragged gasps, but a fire burned in his eyes that hadn't been there mere weeks ago. Again barked Sir Aldrich, the grizzled old knight who had become Alden's secret mentor. The man was well past his prime, with a limp from an old battle wound, but his sword arm remained strong and sure. Alden raised his practiced sword once more, circling warily. He had discovered Sir Aldrich by chance, overhearing the old knight muttering about the king's folly in keeping the prince untrained. It had taken all of Alden's powers of persuasion and no small amount of princely command to convince Aldrich to train him in secret. Their sessions always took place in the hours before dawn, when the castle slept and even the most dutiful guards grew drowsy at their posts. For Alden, it was a small taste of the freedom and purpose he craved. As steel met steel once more, Aldrich pressed forward, his attacks relentless. "You think too much, boy," he growled. "Feel the rhythm of the fight. Let your instincts guide you." Alden tried to clear his mind, to let his body react without overthinking each move. For a moment, it seemed to work. His parries came faster, his footwork more sure. But then he overextended, and Aldrich's blunted blade slipped past his guard, rapping him sharply on the ribs. Oof! Alden stumbled back, wincing. Aldrich lowered his sword, shaking his head. "Better, but still not good enough. The dragon won't pull its strikes, boy." Alden's jaw tightened at the mention of the prophesied beast. "I know," he said, straightening. "I have to be ready. I have to." "You have to learn there's more to being a leader than swinging a sword," Aldrich interrupted. He gestured for Alden to sit on a nearby stone bench, then lowered himself down with a grunt. "Your father's not wrong to want to protect you, but he's forgotten that a prince needs to know his people, to understand strategy and diplomacy." Alden listened intently as Aldrich began to speak of battles long past, of the delicate balance of alliances that could make or break a kingdom. The old knight's words painted vivid pictures of a world far beyond Castle Everbright's walls. As the first rays of sunlight began to creep over the castle walls, Aldrich rose. "Enough for today. Remember, boy, your mind is as much a weapon as your sword. Keep it sharp." Alden nodded, a new determination settling over him. He might not be the strongest swordsman, but he was beginning to understand that true strength came in many forms. As he crept back to his chambers, mind whirling with new knowledge, Alden felt a change taking root within him. He was no longer content to be the sheltered prince, waiting for destiny to find him. With every secret lesson, every stolen moment of growth, he was forging himself into the leader his kingdom would need. The throne room of Castle Everbright buzzed with tension as King Cedric faced the delegation of farmers from the kingdom's outer reaches. Prince Alden stood silently by his father's side, his presence a recent concession to his persistent requests to be involved in matters of state. "Your Majesty," a weather-worn man stepped forward, twisting his cap in calloused hands. "The signs are clear as day. Our crops wither in the fields, the very earth seems to tremble, and strange lights dance in the night sky. Something is coming." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered farmers. Alden leaned forward, his heart quickening. These were the omens the old stories spoke of, the harbingers of great change or great danger. King Cedric's knuckles whitened as he gripped the arms of his throne. "Nonsense," he declared, his voice echoing through the hall. "A poor harvest and some natural oddities do not a prophecy make. Return to your lands, redouble your efforts. The crown will provide what aid it can." As the farmers were ushered out, their faces a mixture of disappointment and fear, Alden turned to his father. "Father, shouldn't we at least investigate these claims, if there's any truth to them?" "Enough," Alden the king snapped, rising from his throne. "I'll not have you filling your head with superstitious nonsense. These are trying times, nothing more." But Alden couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That night, unable to sleep, he slipped from his chambers and made his way to Sir Aldrich's quarters. The old knight answered his knock with a knowing look. "So, you've heard the rumors too, lad?" Alden nodded, following Aldrich into his modest room. Maps and ancient texts were strewn across every surface. The farmers' claims, they match the old legends, don't they? The signs that precede a dragon's coming. Aldrich's weathered face was grim as he unrolled a yellowed scroll. "Aye, that they do. Look here, accounts from the last great dragon attack, centuries ago. Crop failures, earthquakes, auroras in the sky. It's all there." "But my father refuses to see it," Alden said, frustration coloring his voice. "He dismisses every warning, every sign." "Fear makes fools of us all," Lad Aldrich sighed. "Your father's so afraid of the prophecy coming true that he's blinded himself to the very signs that could help us prepare." Alden's mind raced. There must be something we can do, some way to make him see the truth. Aldrich placed a hand on the prince's shoulder. "Sometimes, boy, a leader must act, even when those above him falter. You've learned strategy, diplomacy. Perhaps it's time you put those lessons to use." The prince straightened, a plan already forming in his mind. "You're right. If my father won't investigate these claims, then I must. The people need to know someone is listening, someone is preparing." "It's dangerous," Aldrich warned. "If the king discovers you've gone against his wishes." "Then I'll face the consequences," Alden said firmly. "But I can't stand by and do nothing while our kingdom might be in peril." As he left Aldrich's quarters, a new resolve burned in Alden's chest. He would find a way to slip beyond the castle walls, to see the truth of these omens for himself. The sheltered prince was ready to step into the world, ready to face whatever challenges awaited. The pre-dawn mist clung to Prince Alden's cloak as he slipped through a little-known postern gate, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. For the first time in his life, he was truly leaving the confines of Castle Everbright behind. Sir Aldrich had provided him with commoner's clothes, a sturdy horse, and a rough map of the kingdom. Remember, the old knight had whispered, "You're not a prince out there. You're just Alden, a traveler seeking work. Keep your wits about you and trust your instincts." As the castle disappeared into the mist behind him, Alden felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He was no longer the sheltered prince, but a man on a mission to uncover the truth and protect his people. His journey took him first to the farmlands, where he witnessed firsthand the withered crops and parched earth the farmers had spoken of. In village taverns, he listened to whispered fears of strange occurrences, livestock disappearing, eerie lights in the forests, and an unseasonable chill that seemed to seep into bones. "It's the old magic stirring," an elderly woman told him, her roamy eyes distant with memory. "I felt it once before, long ago. Something's coming, mark my words." But as Alden traveled further from the castle, the signs became more pronounced. In a mountain village, he helped evacuate families when the ground shook violently, cracks appearing in the very foundations of their homes. By a placid lake, he watched in awe as the water receded, revealing ancient ruins long hidden beneath the surface. Each night, huddled by his campfire, Alden would write detailed accounts of what he'd seen and heard. The evidence was undeniable: the kingdom was changing, and not for the better. But it wasn't just the land that was transforming. Alden felt himself changing too. The physical demands of the journey toughened his body, while the challenges he faced sharpened his mind. He learned to negotiate with wary strangers, to read the land and weather, to make swift decisions when danger threatened. Weeks turned into months, and Alden's quest took him to the very borders of the kingdom. It was there, in a half-abandoned outpost, that he heard the most chilling rumor yet. "There's something in the Worm Mountains," a grizzled trader whispered, fear evident in his eyes. "Something massive. It's been sleeping for centuries, they say, but now it's stirring." Alden's blood ran cold. The Worm Mountains were ancient, said to be formed from the bones of long-dead dragons. If something was awakening there. With a heavy heart, he realized it was time to return to Castle Everbright. He had the evidence his father needed to see, the warnings that could no longer be ignored. But more than that, he had grown into the leader his kingdom would need in the dark days to come. As Alden turned his horse homeward, a shadow passed overhead, too large to be a bird, too swift to be a cloud. He looked up, but saw only the vast expanse of sky. Yet somehow, deep in his bones, he knew the dragon was coming, and Alden, no longer the sheltered prince, was ready to face his destiny. The familiar silhouette of Castle Everbright loomed on the horizon, a sight that once represented confinement to Prince Alden, but now promised a chance to save his kingdom. His months-long journey had changed him. The boy who left in secret had returned a man, hardened by experience, and burning with purpose. As Alden approached the castle gates, he noticed an unusual flurry of activity. Guards patrolled the walls in greater numbers, their faces taut with tension. Smoke rose from the blacksmith's forge, and the clang of hammers on metal filled the air. "Halt! Who goes there?" a guard called out as Alden neared. For a moment, Alden considered maintaining his disguise, but he knew time was of the essence. He threw back his hood, revealing his face. "Prince Alden returns. Open the gates immediately." The shock on the guards' faces would have been comical under different circumstances. Word of his arrival spread like wildfire through the castle as Alden strode purposefully towards the throne room, ignoring the startled gasps and whispers that followed in his wake. He burst through the doors, interrupting what appeared to be a heated council meeting. King Cedric's face drained of color at the sight of his son. "Alden. But how? Where have you been?" the king sputtered, rising from his throne. "Father, I bring grave news," Alden announced, his voice carrying the weight of his journey. "The dragon is coming. I've seen the signs with my own eyes, heard the stories from our people. We must prepare, and quickly." The council erupted into chaos, but Alden stood his ground, locking eyes with his father. For a long moment, neither spoke, the air between them charged with unspoken words. Finally, King Cedric raised a hand, silencing the room. "Leave us," he commanded the council members. As the last advisor filed out, the king seemed to age years before Alden's eyes. "I knew," Cedric said softly, slumping back onto his throne. "Deep down, I always knew the prophecy would come to pass. But I hoped that by keeping you safe, by ignoring the signs, I could somehow prevent it." Alden's anger at his father's willful ignorance softened slightly. He approached the throne, kneeling before the king. "Father, I understand your fear. But we cannot hide from this. Our people need us to be strong, to lead them through what's coming." Cedric looked at his son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. "You've changed, Alden. You speak like a king." "I've seen our kingdom, father. I've lived among our people, heard their fears and hopes. I'm ready to stand with you, to face this threat together." A commotion outside interrupted their moment of understanding. The doors flew open, and Sir Aldrich burst in, his face ashen. "Your Majesty, your Highness," he panted, "you must come quickly. On the horizon." Alden's heart clenched. He knew, even before Aldrich finished speaking, what they would see. They raced to the highest tower, emerging onto the battlements just as a shadow fell across the land. There, in the distance, a massive shape blotted out the sun. Wings wider than the castle itself beat the air, and even from afar, the glint of golden scales was unmistakable. The dragon had arrived. King Cedric gripped the stone parapet, his knuckles white. "It's too late," he whispered. "We're not ready." But Alden stood tall, his hand on the hilt of his sword. The fear was there, yes, but alongside it burned a fierce determination. Everything he had learned, everything he had become, had prepared him for this moment. "It's not too late, father," he said, his voice steady. "This is what I was born for. This is why I trained, why I journeyed. I am ready." As the dragon drew nearer, its roar shaking the very foundations of the castle, Alden made a decision. He turned to his father, his eyes blazing with resolve. "I must go to face it. Prepare the defenses, evacuate the people. I'll buy us what time I can." Before anyone could protest, Alden was running, descending the tower stairs 2 at a time. He had a plan forming, desperate perhaps, but the only chance they had. As he reached the courtyard, chaos erupting around him, Alden's mind was clear. He would meet his destiny head-on, not as the sheltered prince he once was, but as the leader he'd become. The dragon's shadow loomed ever larger, and Prince Alden ran towards his fate. Prince Alden's boots pounded against the earth as he raced away from Castle Everbright. The cries of panic from the castle faded behind him, replaced by the thunderous beating of the dragon's wings. With each step, the weight of his decision pressed upon him. He was the kingdom's only hope, yet he felt terrifyingly unprepared. As he crested a hill, Alden spotted a ridge overlooking the castle and the surrounding lands. It was the perfect vantage point, a place where he could assess the situation and perhaps, just perhaps, find a way to confront the beast. Scrambling up the rocky incline, Alden's mind raced through everything he had learned on his journey. The old legends spoke of dragons' weaknesses, their eyes, the soft scales beneath their throats. But how could he, a single man, hope to exploit such vulnerabilities against a creature of such immense size and power? Reaching the top of the ridge, Alden turned to face his home. The sight that greeted him stole the breath from his lungs. The dragon descended upon his father's castle, its massive wings blotting out the sky. The beast was the size of a mountain, its scales shimmering like molten gold in the dying light. From his vantage on the distant ridge, he saw flames erupt as the dragon roared, the sound shaking the earth beneath him. Alden's heart pounded. His father, his kingdom, everything was about to be lost. He gripped the hilt of his sword, feeling powerless despite all his preparation. The months of secret training, the journey across the kingdom, the knowledge he had gained in the face of this monstrous threat, it all seemed woefully inadequate. "I'm not ready," he whispered, eyes wide with the terrible realization. The dragon landed, crushing the castle walls beneath its claws as if they were made of sand. Smoke billowed into the sky, and Alden could hear the distant screams of his people. Every instinct told him to run, to hide, to flee from this impossible foe. But as the beast turned its glowing eyes toward Alden, something inside him stirred. It was more than courage, more than duty. It was the culmination of everything he had become: the sheltered prince who learned to fight, the curious student who sought knowledge, the traveler who came to understand his kingdom and its people. In that moment, facing the very embodiment of the prophecy that had shaped his entire life, Alden found clarity. He might not be ready, but he was all that stood between the dragon and the complete destruction of everything he loved. His grip on his sword tightened, his stance shifted. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but alongside it burned a fierce determination. "Yet I must be," Alden declared, his voice stronger than he expected. With one last look at the castle, his home, his past, Alden made his choice. He might not be ready, but he would meet this challenge head-on. He was no longer the boy hidden away in a castle, but a prince willing to sacrifice everything for his people. And so, with courage born of necessity and love for his kingdom, Prince Alden ran toward the fire. The prophecy had come to pass, but its ultimate outcome was yet to be determined. As Alden raced down the ridge toward his destiny, he carried with him the hopes of an entire kingdom and the strength of the leader he had become. The final battle was about to begin. Thank you so very much for listening to this story. I thoroughly hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe, leave a like, and comment too. I hope to see you on the next adventure.